Joseph Naso, now 91 years old, has been on California's death row for over 11 years. Convicted of the brutal murders of at least 4 women, his execution date remains uncertain, as California's death penalty system has been stalled. But to understand how this man became the double initial killer, we must rewind to the beginning, where a seemingly ordinary life took a dark turn. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for more gripping crime stories. Leave a comment below. Where are you watching from? What's running through your mind as this case unfolds? Your thoughts matter. Joseph Naso was born on January 7, 1934, in Rochester, New York, a working-class city where life was tough but full of opportunity. His parents, Italian immigrants, raised him in a modest household. Little is known about his early family dynamics, but records suggest a stable, if unremarkable, home. No clear signs of abuse or neglect, though his parents' strict expectations may have weighed heavily. Young Joseph was quiet, often overlooked, but those who knew him described a boy who kept to himself, watching the world with a sharp, calculating eye. What was brewing beneath that silence? Naso's childhood wasn't marked by poverty, but it wasn't easy either. His father worked long hours, and his mother kept a tight grip on the household. School was a mixed bag. Joseph was bright enough, attending local schools in Rochester, but he didn't stand out academically. Teachers noted he was a loner, rarely joining in with others. By his teens, there were hints of trouble, small acts of rebellion, like skipping classes or clashing with authority figures. Nothing major, but enough to raise eyebrows. Was this just teenage defiance, or something deeper? After high school, Naso joined the United States Air Force in the 1950s, a move that seemed to promise structure and purpose. He served without distinction, but the experience gave him a taste for freedom and perhaps a way to escape whatever tensions lingered at home. After his discharge, he married his first wife, Judith, and they had a son, Charles. The marriage lasted 18 years, but cracks appeared early. Naso was restless, moving between jobs as a photographer and odd gigs, never settled. His son's later diagnosis with schizophrenia added strain, and Naso's devotion to caring for him in later years stood in stark contrast to the darkness that would emerge. In the 1970s, Naso drifted to San Francisco, taking classes at local colleges and living in the gritty Mission District. He was in his 40s, a time when most settle into stability, but Naso's life was anything but. He began to show a troubling side, petty crimes, like shoplifting women's clothing, which hinted at an obsession that would later turn deadly. These early thefts, often dismissed as eccentric, were red flags. What drove a man in his 60s to steal women's underwear from department stores? By the time Naso moved to Sacramento, in the 1990s, his life seemed to spiral. His divorce from Judith left him unmoored, and his frequent visits to her in the Bay Area kept him tethered to a past he couldn't fully leave behind. His son's mental illness consumed much of his energy, but it also isolated him further, fueling a resentment that simmered beneath the surface. These years, marked by petty thefts, unstable relationships, and a growing fixation, set the stage for the horrors to come. What pushed Joseph Naso from petty criminal to something far worse? The answer lies in the shadows of his past, waiting to be uncovered. If you're still here, hit that subscribe button as we dive into the crime that shook a whole community and beyond. Joseph Naso, a man who seemed to blend into society as a photographer and father, hid a sinister secret that unraveled through a series of brutal murders spanning decades. Known as the double initial killer, due to the chilling pattern of his victims' names, Naso's crimes shocked communities across Northern California. On January 10, 1977, 18-year-old Roxane Rogesh's life was cut short in Marin County, California. Roxane, a young woman from Oakland, was reportedly involved in sex work, though her family vehemently denied this. Naso, then 43, was living in the San Francisco Bay Area, working as a freelance photographer with a history of petty crimes like shoplifting women's clothing. His outwardly normal life masked a growing obsession with control and violence. In the months leading up to Roxane's murder, Naso frequented areas where vulnerable women, including sex workers, could be found. He used his camera as a lure, offering photography sessions to draw women into his web. On that fateful day, Naso likely approached Roxane with a promise of modeling work or a paid photo shoot. He took her to a secluded location, possibly his home or a rented space, where he drugged her to render her helpless. The crime scene revealed a grim reality. Roxine was sexually assaulted, then strangled to death with pantyhose, a method that would become a hallmark of Naso's killings. Her body, naked and discarded like trash, was dumped in the brush near Fairfax, California, along a rural road west of the city. Police estimated she was killed less than a day before her body was found, her skin still bearing the marks of ligature around her neck. The discovery sent shockwaves through her family, who were left grappling with the loss of a vibrant young woman whose dreams were stolen in an act of unimaginable cruelty. What kind of monster could discard a life so callous? Just a year later, on August 13, 1978, 22-year-old Carmen Collin met a similar fate. Carmen, an East Bay resident, was also believed to be a sex worker, making her a target for Naso's predatory instinct. By this time, Naso was living in San Francisco's Mission District, taking college classes and honing his photography skills he twisted into a tool for manipulation. In the weeks prior, he likely scouted locations along the Carquinez Scenic Highway, a quiet stretch between Crockett and Port Costa, about 30 miles from where Roxine's body was found. This isolated road offered the perfect dumping ground, far from prying eyes. Naso likely enticed Carmen with the same ruse, a photography gig, or a promise of money. Once alone with her, he followed his pattern, drugging her to ensure compliance, sexually assaulting her, and then strangling her to death. Her body was found discarded along the Carquinez Scenic Highway, her life extinguished in a brutal act that left her two daughters, Angelique McDonald and Rachel Smith, motherless. The crime scene was haunting. Carmen's body, exposed to the elements, bore the same ligature marks as Roxine's, a chilling signature of Naso's methodical cruelty. Her daughter's grief was compounded by the knowledge that their mother suffered in her final moments, her dignity stripped away by a predator who saw her as disposable. How could someone plan such horror and walk away unnoticed? Pamela Parsons, a 38-year-old waitress, was living near Cooper Avenue in Yuba City, where Naso also resided at the time. Naso, now in his late 50s, had moved to Sacramento after years of drifting. His petty thefts continued, but his darker urges had escalated. Pamela, a hard-working woman trying to make ends meet, crossed paths with Naso, possibly during a photography session. Testimony later revealed that Pamela had stolen one of Naso's cameras, which may have fueled his rage and led to her murder out of spiteful revenge. Naso lured Pamela to his home under the pretense of a photo shoot. Once there, he drugged her, raped her, and strangled her, leaving ligature marks on her wrists and neck and fracturing her throat bone. Her body was dumped in a rural area of Yuba County, left to be found by chance. The crime scene was a stark reminder of Naso's cold precision. Pamela's body, discarded in the wilderness, was accompanied by a newspaper clipping about her death that Naso kept, taped to a photo he had taken of her. Her family was left devastated, their loved one reduced to a trophy in Naso's sick collection. What drove Naso to document his crimes so brazenly? In August 1994, 31-year-old Tracy Tafoya, another Yuba County resident and suspected sex worker, became Naso's next victim. Naso, still in Yuba City, was now 60, but his predatory behavior showed no signs of slowing. Tracy, like Pamela, was vulnerable, struggling to survive in a world that offered little mercy. Naso likely approached her with his usual tactic, a promise of money for a photo shoot. He took her to a secluded spot, drugged her, raped her, and strangled her, leaving her body in a Marysville cemetery, a final act of disrespect. The crime scene was chilling. Tracy's body, abandoned among the gravestones, bore the same ligature marks as Naso's other victim. Her death left her family in anguish, their pain deepened by the knowledge that her killer had posed her body for photographs before discarding her. How long could Naso evade justice for these atrocities? The investigation began with the discovery of the victims' bodies, each found in rural Northern California locations. On January 10, 1977, 18-year-old Roxine Rugish's body was found dumped in the brush near Fairfax, Marin County, strangled with pantyhose. A year later, on August 13, 1978, 22-year-old Carmen Collin's body was discovered along the Carquinez Scenic Highway, also strangled. In 1993, 38-year-old Pamela Parsons was found in Yuba County, and in 1994, 31-year-old Tracy Tafoya's body was left in a Marysville cemetery. Each victim was naked, bearing ligature marks, and believed to be involved in sex work, a pattern that suggested a single predator. But with no immediate suspects, these cases grew cold, haunting investigators for decades. Could one man really be behind such widespread horror? The breakthrough came in April 2010, when Naso, then 76, was arrested in Reno, Nevada, for a mundane reason: shoplifting at a grocery store, a violation of his probation from a 2009 theft conviction in Sacramento County. Nevada parole officers conducted a routine search of his home, expecting to find little more than stolen goods. Instead, they uncovered a house of horror. Inside, they found a handwritten diary, with over 250 entries, detailing sexual assaults, dating back to the 1950s, thousands of photographs of women, some appearing unconscious or dead, posed with mannequin parts and lingerie, and a list of 10, noting unnamed women with geographic location. Among the photos were images of Pamela Parsons and Tracy Tafoya, alongside mementos like a newspaper clipping about Parsons' death and Sarah Dillon's passport, linking Naso to additional unsolved cases. Was this the key to cracking decades-old murder? Forensic evidence became the cornerstone of the case. DNA analysis was pivotal. Naso's DNA was found on the pantyhose used to strangle Roxane Rugish, and his ex-wife's DNA was detected on the same pantyhose wrapped around Roxane's neck, suggesting he used items from his personal life in his crime. A partial DNA match from material under Carmen Collins' fingernails further tied Naso to her murder. The photographs, many showing women in unnatural poses, corroborated the physical evidence, with prosecutors identifying images of Parsons and Tafoya among Naso's collection. The list of 10 was chilling. Entries matched the locations where the 4 victims' bodies were found, and prosecutors believed it described their murders. For example, one entry referenced a girl near Port Costa, aligning with Carmen Collins' dump site. The diary entries, describing how Naso stalked, drugged and assaulted women, painted a vivid picture of his methods. One entry read, "Girl in North Buffalo Woods. She was real pretty. Had to knock her out first." Could this journal reveal even more victims? Naso's prior criminal history strengthened the case. Starting in the 1970s, he had a string of arrests for petty thefts, often stealing women's clothing, including underwear, from department stores in San Francisco and Sacramento. These incidents, while minor, revealed an obsession with women's personal items, mirroring the mementos found in his home. In 1995, he was convicted of theft in Yuba County, around the time of Parsons and Tafoya's murders, placing him in the area. In 2004, Naso assaulted a sex worker in Reno, further showing his predatory behavior toward vulnerable women. These incidents, combined with the forensic evidence, painted Naso as a man whose compulsions escalated from theft to murder. How had he evaded capture for so long? Joseph Naso, acting as his own attorney, presented a bold defense during his 2013 trial in Marin County Superior Court, claiming he was no monster. His primary alibi for Roxane Rugish's murder was that he had consensual sex with her, admitting to a physical relationship, but denying he killed her. He argued there was no proof he put the pantyhose around her neck, suggesting someone else could have committed the murder. For the other victims, Naso insisted his photographs were art, and that all his models were willing participants. He showed the jury dozens of innocuous photos, weddings, landscapes, family, alongside what he called glamour shots of nude women, claiming they were professional and consensual. He also challenged the DNA evidence, calling it inconclusive, and suggested his diary entries were exaggerated or fictional. But could a jury believe a man with such damning evidence against him? Prosecutors dismantled Naso's defense with precision. The DNA evidence was nearly irrefutable. Naso's DNA on Rugish's pantyhose and the partial match under Collins' fingernails directly contradicted his claims of innocence. The list of 10 and diary entries were too specific to be dismissed as fiction, with geographic details matching the crime scenes. For instance, prosecutors linked an entry about a girl in Marysville to Tracy Tafoya's body in the cemetery. The photographs of Parsons and Tafoya, taken before or after their deaths, were particularly damning, showing them in poses that suggested they were unconscious or deceased. Naso's claim that these were consensual art photos fell apart when prosecutors presented images of other women in similar states, alongside his collection of mannequin parts and lingerie. His prior thefts of women's clothing, and the 2004 assault in Reno, further undermined his credibility, showing a pattern of predatory behavior. Legal analysts criticized Naso's decision to represent himself, noting he failed to hire a DNA expert to challenge the forensic evidence, a move that might have cast doubt on its handling. Was Naso's arrogance his own undoing? Key moments in the trial were emotionally charged. Prosecutors, led by Deputy District Attorney Rosemary Sloat, read from Naso's diary, exposing his chilling accounts of stalking and assaulting women. One entry described offering a woman a ride before assaulting her in his car, a pattern matching the victim's Victims' families, including Roxine's son, Shane Ashby, and Carmen's daughters, Angelique McDonald and Rachel Smith, gave heart-wrenching statements, detailing the pain of losing their loved ones. Naso, unmoved, continued to assert his innocence, even boasting, "I think I'm doing quite well," during his closing arguments, which spanned a day and a half. The jury wasn't swayed. After deliberating for about 8 hours over 2 days, on August 20, 2013, they found Joseph Naso guilty of the first-degree murders of Roxine Rugash, Carmen Collin, Pamela Parsons, and Tracy Tafoya. On November 22, 2013, Marin County Superior Court Judge Andrew Sweet sentenced Naso to death for the 4 murders. The courtroom was heavy with emotion as families confronted Naso, with Shane Ashby saying he was robbed of a childhood and a mother. The judge called Naso's crimes vicious and heartless, noting the calculated nature of his action. However, California's death penalty moratorium, in place since 2006, meant Naso was unlikely to face execution, leaving him among the 725 inmates on death row at the time. The verdict closed a chapter, but the list of 10 hinted at 6 other potential victims, leaving a lingering question: how many more lives did Naso destroy? Joseph Naso, now 91, has spent over 11 years on California's death row at San Quentin State Prison, a sprawling facility north of San Francisco, known for housing the state's most notorious criminal. His behavior on death row, interactions with others, and daily routine reveal a complex figure, one who continues to evade full accountability for his crimes, while hinting at even darker secrets. How does a man like Naso live with the weight of his actions in the confines of a San Quentin's death row is a grim, high-security world. Inmates are housed in small, concrete cells, roughly 4 by 9 feet, with a bed, toilet and sink. The environment is stark: gray walls, constant noise from clanging gates, and the ever-present tension of men awaiting their death row. Inmates are segregated from the general population, especially serial killers like Naso, who are seen as targets under the convict code that brands them as vermin for their crime. This isolation is meant to protect them, but it also creates a lonely existence, with limited human contact, beyond guards and occasional visitors. For Naso, this solitude seems to suit his reclusive nature, but it hasn't silenced him completely. Naso's days on death row are structured and repetitive. Inmates typically get a few hours outside their cells for exercise in the medically restricted yard, reserved for older or high-risk prisoners like Naso. He likely spends this time walking or sitting alone, given his advanced age and deteriorating health, which has been noted as declining since his transfer to San Quentin. Inside his cell, Naso has access to books, writing materials, and a small radio or TV, standard for death row inmates. Reports suggest he spends much of his time writing, possibly continuing the meticulous documentation that marked his crimes. But what is he writing now? More denials, or confessions to crimes still unknown? His behavior in prison has been a mix of arrogance and defiance. Naso has shown little remorse for his victims, maintaining his innocence even after his 2013 conviction. In a 2016 interview with journalist Dan Noyes, when asked how many people he killed, Naso deflected with a chilling retort: "How many did we claimed? I killed none," despite overwhelming evidence, including his DNA on Roxine Rugash's pantyhose, and photographs of his victims. This lack of remorse has drawn scorn from victims' families, with Roxine's son Shane Ashby expressing a desire for Naso to live to 100. Naso's courtroom antics, representing himself, flipping off the jury and calling the prosecutor a whore, carry over into his prison demeanor, where he's described as unrepentant and self-absorbed. Did he ever feel a flicker of guilt for the lives he destroyed? Despite his defiance, Naso has engaged with at least one fellow inmate, William Noguera, a convicted murderer who became an unlikely informant. Noguera, working as an amateur detective, befriended Naso over a decade and claimed Naso confessed to killing 26 women, far more than the 4 he was convicted for. Naso reportedly shared details about his list of 10, laughing off the prosecution's interpretation and claiming it wasn't his top 10, but part of a larger tally. These conversations, detailed in over 300 pages of notes, handed to former FBI investigator Ken Maines, suggest Naso remains fixated on his crimes, possibly reveling in their secrecy. His interactions with guards, however, are less documented, likely formal and minimal due to his segregation and age. San Quentin staff describe death row as a place where inmates like Naso are managed with strict oversight, ensuring safety but offering little warmth. Naso has not publicly turned to religion, unlike some inmates who seek redemption through faith. There's no record of him attending prison chapel services or expressing spiritual remorse. Instead, he's focused on legal maneuvers, filing appeals to challenge his conviction. In 2013, he moved for a new trial, arguing the evidence was planted, and the case was politically motivated, but Judge Andrew Sweet swiftly denied it. As of August 22, 2025, Joseph Naso has no scheduled execution date. California's death penalty moratorium, in place since 2006, has halted all executions, with 707 inmates on death row as of Governor Gavin Newsom's 2019 executive order further imposed a moratorium, granting reprieves to all condemned inmates, including Naso. Legal analysts note that even if the moratorium lifts, Naso's advanced age and health issues make it unlikely he'll face execution. The state's ongoing struggle to adopt a new single-drug execution protocol still under review adds further uncertainty. Joseph Naso's life on death row reveals a man unmoved by the pain he caused, living out his days in isolation, while families of his victims grapple with unresolved grief. The possibility of additional victims, hinted at by his own words, casts a long shadow. Was justice served by locking him away, or does the lack of execution, and answers about other potential victims, leave the case unresolved? What do you think this means for the families still searching for closure? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe.